doing a great campaign, and you're gonna keep losing if you insist that she ran a great campaign.
I'm saying, look, there was no model for the campaign.
Donna Brazile is losing it. She still can't seem to process the election loss, stuck in full-blown denial. But you know Maher. He has zero patience for people who bend reality to fit their narrative. So when Donna tried her usual spin, he obliterated her hypocrisy. And believe me, it was brutal. There's a lot to break down here, so let's get started.
The big issue, right, was immigration. And
inflation, immigration.
Those two are very big issues. And you asked Vice President Harris,
right,
why did you let all these people in for the last 4 years? She did not have an answer. I still don't know the answer. They actually could, with an executive order, shut it down as they did earlier this year. So why did they not do it 3 years earlier? And I think people felt she did not respond to that in any way. She had no answer on inflation, and she also seemed to represent that whole woke zone that people are sick to death of. And I think those three did it.
I agree with the first two, but I'm not going to get into this, oh, the people are too damn woke. That wasn't a issue.
It was a big issue whether you want to admit it or not. People were exhausted from the endless woke messaging, the alphabet soup of genders, kids being pushed into transitioning without parental consent, biological, men bulldozing their way into women's sports. The list never ended. It felt like everyone was trapped under the weight of the woke brigade, force-fed their propaganda while being called bigots for daring to question it. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris barely mentioned the real issues. Newsflash. No one cares about your pronouns when they can't afford food. People noticed, and they made sure their voices were heard. So do you now understand when I say Donna is losing it?
I know, and that's why you're going to keep losing.
No, man, look.
I mean, it's not to go. Okay. But not to go.
On July 21st at 1:41 p.m., when Joe Biden announced that he was going to step down, Kamala Harris had to step up. Now, what other Democrat could have stepped up in that period of time?
We're not arguing about that.
All right.
We're arguing the campaign she ran. They asked her what she would do differently. She said, I can't think of anything. That's terrible.
How do we trust a party that was telling us with a straight face that Joe Biden could be president for 4 more years without any problem whatsoever? That's what the Democrats were telling us. It was a massive lie. We saw through it. Everyone saw through it.
Did you see him this week? Could you imagine if we were just starting on
Bill Maher nailed it. One major reason the Democrats lost was the non-stop lying from the White House. It was obvious Biden wasn't fit to lead. He wandered off mid-speech, shook hands with thin air, and needed cue cards, just to sit down. Yet Donna Brazile and others kept gaslighting us, insisting he could handle another term. And his backup? Even worse. Kamala Harris had no plan, no vision, and when asked what she'd do differently, she fumbled and delivered her usual word salad. No wonder voters saw through it. She wasn't just unprepared, she was out of her depth. Rambling, awkward, laughter, and saying absolutely nothing in a full minute. It was painful to watch. And the media? They covered for her, burying stories and editing interviews to make her look competent. Now, let me play you a leaked 60 Minutes clip where she performed so badly they had to cut parts out just to save her campaign. Watch this.
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles. Well, let's start with this. On this subject, the aid that we have given Israel allowed Israel to defend itself against 200 ballistic missiles that were just meant to attack the Israelis and the people of Israel. And I think that is the most recent example of why what we do to assist in their defense around military aid is important. And when we think about the threat that Hamas, Hezbollah presents, Iran, I think that it is without any question our imperative to do what we can to allow Israel to defend itself against those kinds of attacks. Now, the work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles, which include the need for humanitarian aid, the need for this war to end, the need for a deal to be done which would release the hostages and create a...
If you actually understood what Kamala Harris just said in the unedited version, please enlighten me in the comments, because I'm completely lost. Seriously, was that even English? CBS had to edit her answer just to make it sound halfway coherent. They literally cut out the embarrassing rambling, stitched together the least ridiculous parts, and hoped no one would notice. And this is who the woke mob was trying to force on us. A VP who needs a professional editing team just to sound competent. They told us she was a historic leader, a brilliant mind. But the second you remove the media's safety net, it's nothing but word salads and nervous laughter. No wonder the American people weren't buying it. It's almost like they thought we wouldn't notice. But no amount of editing can hide the fact that Kamala Harris struggles to form a single, coherent thought under pressure. Imagine needing an entire PR team just to get through a basic interview. How is that leadership? The media boosted her. The woke crowd demanded we celebrate her. But when it came time to really lead, she fell flat on her face. And if you think this was a fluke, here's another shocker from former Vice
Not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end. The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region. And we're not going to stop doing that. We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
It's almost remarkable that Donna Brazile can blame the election defeat on everything except Kamala Harris. For crying out loud, Harris was vice president for 4 years, yet she still sounded completely clueless when asked about U.S. foreign policy toward Israel. It wasn't a trick question, not a gotcha moment, just basic knowledge she should have mastered by now. But, instead, we got another rambling, incoherent answer that left everyone wondering if she even knew what she was talking about. This is exactly why they lost. Biden had lost touch with reality, and his so-called successor had no idea what she was doing. The American people saw the disaster unfolding in real time and said, "No thanks." But instead of admitting their mistakes, the Democrats doubled down, pretending everything was fine, gaslighting the public by insisting Harris was a strong leader, when she couldn't even string together a competent response. Voters weren't fooled. They saw the incompetence, the lack of direction, and the sheer failure of leadership.
They clearly made a calculus over here, and I'm not sure it was fully thought through or it's coming to fruition the way they thought, because I don't think they actually changed anybody's minds in terms of the coherence or succinctness of Kamala Harris as a communicator. She had been well established as somebody who was prone to rambling. This term word salad has become a phrase that everybody's familiar with.
As we mentioned earlier, the media played a massive role in this deception, desperately trying to force Kamala Harris onto the American people. But guess what? It didn't work. No amount of media spin could convince voters she was competent when every unedited clip told a different story. Instead of holding her accountable, they covered for her, edited her gaffes, and acted like everything was fine. Problem? Voters saw through the charade. No amount of media manipulation could hide the truth. Maher then tore into the media for their clear bias, calling out their shameless attempts to shield Harris from criticism. Their job was supposed to be reporting the truth, not running PR for an administration that couldn't even handle the American people. But guess what? It didn't work. No amount of media spin could convince voters she was competent when every unedited clip told a different story. Instead of holding her accountable, they covered for her, edited her gaffes, and acted like everything was fine. The problem? Voters saw through the charade. No amount of media manipulation could hide the truth. Maher then tore into the media for their clear bias, calling out their shameless attempts to shield Harris from criticism. Their job was supposed to be reporting the truth, not running PR for an administration that couldn't even handle basic questions.
Appropriate to bury the Hunter Biden.
You're talking about the press doing that?
He's saying that's what they did, and that is what they did. They buried the Hunter Biden story before the election because they were like, We can't risk having the election thrown to Trump. We'll tell them after the election.
And we know for a fact that that's what they did?
Of course. You don't
but
follow
I mean,
this.
saying you know for a fact that that's what they did. I don't know what they did.
I know, because you only watch MSNBC.
No, that's not